Good morning.
Good morning.
Joan Marconi,
Good morning.
also known to some of our viewers as Sister Joseph Elaine.
Elaine.
Yes, and we'll find out how you got that name and why you went back to your baptismal name
Okay.
further down in our story.
Sure.
So thank you for coming and sharing your history and your life with us, life with your family and with us. So let's start with your beginnings. And where was that?
Okay, I was born in Boston, Massachusetts. I was born of two Italian people, Armand Marconi and Irene Gagliardi. And we're a typical Italian family. We had lots of relatives. My grandmother and grandfather lived very close. And we spent much of our time with them. And as a young person, I was an only child.
Oh, you were? No
I
brothers
had
and sisters?
no brothers or sisters because when my mother had me, I guess she had a very hard time with me, so she could not have any more children. However, growing up, we spent a lot of time with the family members, especially on Sundays. Sunday was our big day. My grandmother always cooked spaghetti or macaroni on Sunday. And we had many, many people that came to visit us at that time.
Many. Roundabout, how many?
Well, our whole family, so it would be, we could have as many as 20 people at dinner on Sunday. My grandmother loved to cook, and she loved to cook spaghetti. And of course, we always had it every single Sunday, along with other things. But everybody who came enjoyed it immensely.
Cousins and aunts and uncles.
Cousins and aunts
yeah.
and uncles, and it was like a family affair. Everybody got together, and we spent most of the day together. But I remember during the week, I was the person who ran around and brought people little samples of what my grandmother made. She always made dishes of spaghetti for the people in the neighborhood. So I maybe went as far as maybe 6 or 7 people at a time. I would be bringing the dishes of macaroni. And then about Wednesday or Thursday, I'd go and collect the plates and bring them back for the next Sunday. So that was my job as growing up, was to take the spaghetti around.
Feeding the hungry.
Feeding the hungry. And my grandmother really enjoyed doing that, but that was our younger years. And then when I got to be in about 2nd grade, my mother and dad went through a very hard divorce. And so at that time, my dad had to go and find work naturally because it was during the Depression. My mother, she was a working person also. And she went to Florida in order to get work because she was offered a job down there. It was a very good job. So I stayed with my grandmother for about maybe 5 or 6 years because I remember all of grade school with my grandmother and grandfather. And
your mom is in Florida?
And my mom was in Florida.
And your dad still?
My dad was somewhere. I don't know where, but I mean, he would come and get me periodically and we'd go out. I used to remember going to the zoo with him, and this is a little shady, but I think it's kind of amusing. We'd go to the zoo, and I was about 4, maybe or 5, so he'd take me in a carriage, and so we'd go. And I remember this only one incident that I remember, and that is that going into the lion's house, and we went in there to see the lions. And I don't know whether my father was being funny or what, but anyhow, he evidently did something. Because we're looking at the lions, and all of a sudden the lion lifted his leg, and he sprayed my father. My father was so angry. And I thought it was hysterical, and that's the only thing that I remember about my journeys to the zoo. So it must have been very impressive. So anyhow, I thought that was quite entertaining. So
you spent many of your first years in Boston.
My formative years in Boston with my grandparents,
And how was that experience for you?
That was wonderful. They were very, very...
Whose parents were they?
My mother's.
Okay.
Yeah. My father's parents lived in Barre, Massachusetts, which was outside of Worcester, and I would go there for the summers. And they lived in a little mill town, Italian mill town, where everybody worked in the mill. And my grandfather was dead on that side, but my grandmother and all of the relatives there worked in the mill, and and I enjoyed my summers there because it was I got out of the city, and I was able to go and be with my relatives.
Well, I noticed that you went to St. Joseph Academy. How did?
Well, that's when I entered.
Oh, when you
Yeah,
entered.
because, well, first of all, I went to Jesu in Miami.
So you went down to Florida to
Oh, yes, I'm sorry. I went to Florida when I was entering high school.
Okay.
Because my mother felt that I was old enough to, to be partially independent. So I went to Florida at that time, and I enrolled in in Jesu High School. And I really liked that. I liked the St. Joseph Sisters. And it was during that time that I think I must have gotten my vocation, because I said something to my mother about wanting to be a nun, and she said, "No way, we're not going to talk about that, period." So I thought, well, I've got time. I'm still in high school. I can wait. So it was very interesting because, some time went by, and we never talked about it again. And all of a sudden, my mother went to down to Burdines, where she used to get her hair done. She came back one day and she said, "I made an appointment with you for some nuns down in Miami." And I looked at her and I said, "What are you talking about?" So I found out that she went to her hair appointment, and her hairdresser was Charles of Burdines. I guess he had a big name. But anyhow, he was a nice little man, and he wanted to become a Dominican priest. And he was telling my mother about it, and she said, "Oh, I got a daughter that wants to be a nun." He said, "Oh." And he said, "Well," he said, "I know these two sisters on the beach," and he said, "They're absolutely wonderful, and I could get her an appointment to talk to them." So he did. And it was Sister Henrice and Sister Rose Eileen Ferguson and Sister Henrice Binder.
They were at Casa?
They were at the Casa.
At the residence for young women.
Yes, and I was there. I would go there to see it. So for a whole year, I would go on the weekends and work with them. I would sell religious articles, I would answer the telephone, all that crazy stuff that kids would do. And it was really I just enjoyed it so much, and I liked being with the girls. And so I guess I could say they were my mentors.
Right.
But actually, my mother was my sponsor.
Oh, she was?
Well, yeah, because she's the one that introduced me to the nuns. So anyhow, that's where I got my vocation, I guess. And Rose Eileen and Henrice were just wonderful to me, and I was devastated when they left the community. Both of them left. I think I was a young nun then, and I wasn't out of the novitiate too long when they left.
Right, I think I remember something going on at that time, whatever.
Yeah.
So from there, you went to the academy. You finished high school?
Well, I didn't really go. I stayed in the novitiate, and people were teaching it, but but I went through St. Joseph's Academy. Finished up.
So you entered before you graduated from high school?
Yes, I did.
Good. Okay. And with Mother's blessing?
Well, that's right. And but my mother was. After that, she was fine.
Isn't that?
Before that, she didn't want to hear a thing about it.
Talk about being in the right place at the right time.
Right, and I just think the way God works, He works so differently with everybody.
So your mother and Charles of Burdines.
And he did go to be a priest.
Oh, he did?
And he was in for a while, but then I don't know what happened. I don't think he was able to cut the education part of being a Dominican. So then he went into the Franciscans for a while. Didn't make it there either, so I don't know whatever happened to him.
Okay. All right, so now you're in Adrian. You went through the formation program, and you were sent out where'd you go first? In Illinois?
No, I think the first place I went was in St. Charles. Not St. Charles, Wall Lake.
Wall Lake.
Yeah, I was there, I think, 2 years.
Of your first, 5-10 years or so, what was a ministry perhaps that engaged you in a different way than the others? You certainly were a teacher.
Yeah, I guess I was really just involved in teaching more than anything else. I had to learn all kinds of stuff.
Right.
And as I said, I was there, and I was at St. Where was my second place? I was at You got it on that list?
Well, you were in Walled Lake. That was one of the first, and then St. Charles and
St.
Joliet.
Charles.
St. Charles.
Yes, and that was a good
Nice little town.
experience. Yeah, I really enjoyed it there, and I was there for about 7 or 8 years, I think. And then from there, I went. I don't know where I went then. I think I.
But we were still at that point in our history of you were being assigned.
Right.
Right. Okay.
Right. I was assigned there,
Okay.
and
So you went from elementary school to high school.
then that's when I went down to Florida.
And what was your?
Actually, before I went to Florida, I was in Chicago. I was
Okay.
at Aquinas.
What did
And,
you teach?
Science,
Oh, science,
chemistry,
science.
and physics, and not physics, chemistry, and biology and math. All those things.
All those hard subjects.
Yeah. Well, so anyway, well, that was my major. So and then from there, from Aquinas, I asked if I could go to Florida because my mother was in Florida, and she really needed me at that time.
Okay.
So I got assigned to Florida, and that's when I went to St. Thomas Aquinas in Chicago, in Fort Lauderdale. So when I was there, taught there for quite a while. I enjoyed that. I mean, I enjoyed every place I was.
Yes, yes. And every place enjoyed you.
Well,
Yes.
I was always a doer rather than a thinker. I did more than I probably should have.
Well, I think that happened back when you delivered the spaghetti or noodles or you did when you were a kid. See,
That's right.
That whole idea of service and mission.
That's right. That's right. But I enjoyed those years, and then from there, then I did a little stint at where was I? I was in West Palm.
Okay.
And I had to be in charge of the girls, which I did not like.
Oh, wait,
that was
Rosarian.
one thing I didn't like, was being in charge of the girls.
The high school.
Yeah, I mean the boarders,
Uh-huh.
because you were with them every minute.
That's right.
Never got away from them. So I did that for a while, and then from there, then my life began, because then from there I went to become an occupational therapist.
Now that's
I
an interesting
absolutely
comment.
loved that. I just
life began.
that was I just loved doing that.
What was it that so
Well, the fact that
grabbed
I
you?
could work one-on-one with people in the healthcare industry, I really felt that I had a talent for working with sick. And I guess I did, because I really loved it. And I was in that profession for about 25 years or longer. I don't know. Time gets away from you. When
And
you're
you
having
taught
fun.
that at Barry University.
I started the program.
Oh, you did? Okay.
Yes, I started the program. I don't know how they even found me, but they did. They asked if I would come. They really needed my credentials, to be.
Come on, Joan, they needed more than your
Well,
credentials.
they needed somebody in there that had credentials,
Right,
so that
right.
they could start something, which I did. And I found that to be fine, but I did not want to be back in education. I really wanted to be in the clinic. So I committed myself to 2 years. And of course, everybody was fine with that until it was time for me to move on. And then they said, well, we thought you'd be here forever. And I said, no. So I stayed 1 more year till they found somebody. And that was, so then I went back into the clinic. So then I spent quite a few years I worked in Delray Beach, and I worked in St. Mary's in West Palm, and I really enjoyed that too. So occupational therapy really is what I consider my profession, even though I taught for a lot of years.
Can you recall perhaps one significant experience or event at one of those places that you have been at with the healthcare, with the occupational therapy, that really stands out? Perhaps an experience with a person?
I had one patient that was really very, very sick. And he really lost all control over his body. So he was very difficult to work with. He had Guillain-Barré. And
He had what?
Guillain-Barré. It's a neurological disease. And I felt that I was present to him. He was a Jewish man.
Mm-hmm.
He was a very fine person. And his wife was Catholic. He was Jewish. He was an Egyptian Coptic Catholic. But I had a nice relationship with him, and I always thought that I was going to be able to help him. You know how everybody thinks that they can do miracles?
Yeah.
Well, I didn't do miracles, but before he died, he expressed to me that he was so grateful that I was there at that time in his life. So I felt like I had contributed something to society.
You don't see that as a miracle?
Well, I guess it was, because
Yes,
it wasn't me. I mean,
right,
it was God.
Mm-hmm.
But I did enjoy that too.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So then you came up here to
Yeah, I
Michigan?
came up here at that time. Well, I came up here because, see, Trace and I lived down in Delray together in a condo that was owned by my uncle. And I think they thought we were going to stay there forever, but I knew I wasn't. Trace got an offer to come up and be Sister Marcella's assistant.
Yes. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And I thought, gee, I'm going to be down here all by myself. But anyhow, I guess I could have been all right. But I said, well, if anything else opens up, I'm coming. And something did. Jane Payette called me up and said, would you help me in maintenance?
That's right.
I thought, I don't know a thing about maintenance. She said, oh, it's so easy. She said, come on up and we'll try it out.
I remember. So what did you do in maintenance?
I was in charge. But, you know, you're in charge, but you're not in charge. The guys all knew what they were doing, thank God.
Uh-huh.
But those were really fun years because I just enjoyed them so much. We had more parties than anything else because I like parties.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So I'd make pizza and we'd have that usually a couple of times a week.
So are any of the men from that time still there?
No.
I don't think so.
No.
Yeah.
Most of them have gone.
Yeah, that's right.
Have
That's
died.
right.
Leonard, I remember Leonard was
The
still.
security.
No, Leonard Blaker was one of my men. He was
Okay.
really very good.
Mm-hmm.
He's still alive.
Mm-hmm.
His wife died recently, Inez.
Mm-hmm.
Homer,
Right,
Homer's
Homer.
still alive.
Yeah. But none of them are still employed by us, but they were part of us for a long time. One of the
No,
co-workers.
so none of them know me.
Uh-huh. Mm-hmm. So as you look back on your journey in your life, you've had many blessings, many challenges. What challenge especially stands out for you?
Challenge. Well, one of the things that I embraced was Healing Touch Ministry.
Right, I forgot that.
And I was really very enamored.
Explain that to us.
Well, when I was ready to retire, I was thinking to myself, I want to have something that I can go into. I want a ministry. I don't want to just retire. I want something that I can do.
Retire/work.
Right. And there was a program that was being conducted at St. Mary's for the nursing.
In West Palm?
In West Palm. It was Healing Touch. And so I went to it and I thought, wow, this is great. Because if we just bring a spiritual dimension to it, then we've got it made in the shade. Mm-hmm. So I thought, this is what I'm going to do. So I took the class and I got into Healing Touch Ministry. And I worked down in Florida for a while in the parishes. And then it was time, I was called up here, I guess, again, and I can't remember what for, but I thought, well, I can bring my Healing Touch up here with me, which I did. It worked for a while, but you know, the sisters are not the same as other people. They were a little skeptical about it. And so the hardest thing for me, or the most challenging, was to try to make them understand that Healing Touch was not something that I was doing. Healing Touch was really their own self-healing that they were doing along with God. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And that the healing that would take place was not necessarily the healing that they wanted. Let's say, you know, you were sick with some kind of a disease and you wanted to be cured. Curing is not the same as healing. So that God was going to heal you, but not the way you expected to be healed. That was the most difficult thing for me to get across, but I think I did reach a few people.
Wonderful.
So that was my extent of my healing touch, and I'm still involved in that, you know.
Oh, you are?
Not physically, because it's too hard to get, you know, I'm retired now and I'm not all that healthy, but I really like to encourage people that are involved in that ministry, because it is a good one. So that's...
What gives you energy and passion at this time of your life?
Well, I guess the thoughts that I had contributed in some way through those different ministries, that gives me some encouragement that I've got to get up there to heaven. Hopefully, God's going to pull me up by the skin of my teeth.
Yeah, you've had many setbacks, but you always seem to bounce back.
Right.
You do. So talk about that healing touches. Exactly. You experienced and lived what you taught. And, you know, as you're going on, you've had many ministries, and you've changed them. But there's been one constant. You know, said you absolutely love the therapy. What's been the constant in all of your ministries?
I guess is my dependence on God. That's a constant for me. That I know that I can't do it by myself. That is, you know, that sometimes people get caught up in the moment. I don't get caught up in the moment because I know I'm not responsible. Somebody else is responsible. I'm just there. I'm a conduit. I'm a whatever.
So you say you are the most. You've been very present to people, but God is certainly the most constant. But also you have been the one with the teacher and the physical therapy and the high schools and all the things that you've been involved in.
Well, I guess I really didn't think about it that way.
You know, we go from one ministry to another, and you responded to the call, and God was with you. You didn't do it by yourself. The sermon got you through some of that.
Yeah, it's true.
Yeah. So, do you have some advice that you'd like to give to our listeners, our viewers?
Well, I think what we need to do, what I personally try to do, is to take people where they are. Not to expect more from somebody that they can give me. And so to me, my advice to someone else would be, you know, cool it. Just stay with it. And don't expect from somebody more than they can give you. And then I think we'll be all right. So I've made that my life's work.
That's beautiful.
Don't expect more.
And who has been, probably a significant person in your life?
Oh, I've had a lot of wonderful women that have worked with me through the years. One person that I lived with was Sister Helen Claire Doyle. She was wonderful. And she was very good to my mother. Every week we would go down to Miami to visit my mother. She on her day off. She'd take us to dinner, and we'd have a really nice evening. But she was really her mentor. She was her. Helen Claire was the person that my mother looked up to. I was just the kid. I was still the kid, even though I was 30 or 40 years old by that time. But Helen was very, very good to me. So she played a big part in my life. Also, Sister Rosaria Bushing. She was very instrumental. She was my first high school superior, and I really loved her. She was a great woman. And I'm trying to think, and of course my mother was my grandparents were wonderful.
Your grandparents, right?
Yeah,
right.
They were just tremendous. And the thing that was hard for me was, you know, to leave my grandmother because she was, you know, so very loving. But I felt that I needed to go with my mother because I didn't know my mother. I had to learn to know her as a person, which I did when I went to Florida. So I was forever grateful for that.
You've lived through many world events,
Okay.
you know, significant events. during your lifetime thus far. Can you just,
World events.
yeah,
Okay.
things that went on, I mean, 9/11 or whatever, can you recall one event in particular where you were and what was going on at the time and your
Yes.
reaction and how it affected you?
Well, when I was at Aquinas
In
in
Chicago?
Okay, that was when Kennedy died.
Okay, and where were you? You were living at Aquinas.
I was at Aquinas, and we were in class, and we got called out of class. You know, we were all in the hallway, all of the nuns, you know, because it was such a shock. That, I think, was a very significant time for me. You know, because we all loved Kennedy. And he was an Irish Catholic. I mean, come on. I remember when he was running for president, and he would come in his motorcade, and at one time we were all lined up on the sidewalk, you know, waiting to see him, and he'd just bend over in the car and say, "Hi, sisters. Hi, sisters. How are you?" And so he waved to us, and we was just thrilled to death. So that was, I think, a very big time for me.
Made an impression on you.
Significant, yeah. Right.
Anything else you want to leave with us?
No.
Very fascinating
I
life
don't,
so
I'm
far.
a woman of few words.
Well, I
I
don't
don't
know.
usually speak this much.
I know, this has been awesome.
In fact, I was thinking to myself that one of the things that I have to say about myself is that I'm not good in large groups at all, ever. I've never been good. Small groups, 2 or 3, I'm fine. So it's okay with you and me and
Scott.
my friend here
Scott.
watching in the background, however. No, I'm not good with big crowds.
And I think the more we move along in life, we find that more about ourselves.
Right.
You just,
I've always been a doer, but always a doer in the background. I don't like to call too much attention to myself. But as I've gotten older, I've become more retrospective, and I'm just more quiet, more comfortable in my own skin. But that's where I am now.
well, Joan Marconi, thank you. Joan Marconi, Sister Joseph Elaine, thank you so much
You're
for doing this with us. And I'm sure there's many friends out there who are going to see this, you know, on YouTube.
Yeah, somebody said that. I didn't realize that it went out beyond
So
the
it's
community.
beyond the congregation. That's right. So just wait till you see. And that's why it's important that I try to bring in the sister's religious name. How did you get that, Joseph Elaine?
Oh, Joseph is my grandfather.
Your grandfather,
And
okay.
Elaine was my little cousin, as my
Okay.
mother's sister's daughter, Elaine.
Okay.
They both are deceased at this point.
Yeah.
I don't have too many family members left.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I depend on the congregation to be my family.
And we are.
I
We
know.
are. So I thank you in the name of the congregation for all your many
You're welcome.
services and ministries and service to us that you've been and continue to be, particularly by your presence among us. Always pleasant,
Thank
always
you.
engaging.
Thank you.
So thank you, Joan, very much.
Thank you.